Sorry, you guys should off your mic. You guys should off your mic.
ó máa pé 1 year bọ̀ máa ṣàdúrà ìbìnà accommodation.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If you can hear my voice, just respond through the chat box. Oh, okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the response.
Good morning, Ma. We're happy to have you here, Ma.
Okay, thank you. May I also remind all of us that the only means of communication in this class is via the chat box. I have muted everybody, and I would expect that everybody will remain muted until the end of this class. If you unmute yourself without permission, I will send you out of the class. That will be the penalty. But I'm going to assume that that will not happen because you actually comported yourself very well last week. And I highly commend you that you were able to do that last week. So I expect that we'll continue in that trend as well. Please give me some feedback. Okay, so I took that call because it seems as if some were complaining that they could not actually hear me. So let me ask again before I continue. Respond in the chat box. You can hear me. Okay, yes. Thank you. What are we going to do with these people that keep unmuting themselves? I don't like this at all. Okay, I think I'll begin to send them out. I think that's the solution. When I send them out, remove. Remove. I think that's the best thing. You unmute yourself, I send you out of the class. I think that will make that will be a very good decision. And that's what I'll start doing now, so that there can be sanity in this class. So this morning, we want to look at the theory of demand. As economic students who I think passed, well, I'm assuming, had the credits in economics, and that's why they're in this class. Demand is not a strange concept. You would have come across demand in your school start level. And what we're going to do here is just going to be just a little bit above what you were expected to know at your school start level. That's what we're going to do this morning. So we're going to start by defining what demand is. Demand is the relationship between the price of a certain good or service and the quantity of that good or service a consumer is willing and able to buy at a given price. What then is price? Price is the amount that a consumer The YouTube is working. Why would it not work? Okay, give me a few minutes. Let me try and see. The YouTube is working perfectly. So it could be a problem from some set of students or their network. So like I was saying, price is the amount that a consumer pays for consuming a particular service or good. So if that is the case, then we say that demand is the quantity of goods and services that a consumer is willing to buy, at a particular price and at a point in time. That is what demand is. Is willing and able. The willing and able is very, very important in economics, because in economics, we take into account effective demand, which is the ability to pay for a service or good. So that automatically means that you are not part of those demanding for a commodity if you do not have the ability to pay for such commodity. So you can only demand when you are willing to buy and able to buy that commodity at the specified price. That is what it means in demand means in economics. And so we say that the quantity demanded will now be the amount that the individual will now buy in a given period and at the current market price. In a given period and at the current market price, that would be the quantity demanded. So actually, there's a difference between what demand is and what quantity. And what quantity demanded is. So we have demand. So that is the quantity demanded. Now we move on to a demand schedule. Now, a demand schedule is a table. It's a layout that shows the relationship between quantity demanded and the price. So that means that we are looking at what happens to quantity demanded at various prices. That's what a demand schedule is. And I'm going to show you that table now. And in that table, you will find out that price is measured in dollars per gallon of fuel, and the quantity is measured in millions. In millions. Okay, so we can say naira. So that is dollar anyway. Let's just continue with that. So this is a demand schedule. That's what it looks like. And you have price being measured in dollars, and you have quantity demanded being measured in millions. Now, if you look at this table, you would find out that when the price of a gallon of fuel was 1 naira, 800 million gallons of fuel was demanded. Now, when the price increased to 1.60, when the price increased to 1.60, 550 million gallons of fuel was demanded. And when the price increased to 2.20, 420 gallons of fuel was demanded. Now, from that table, one thing is obvious, and that is you would discover that as price fell, quantity demanded increased. So in the same way, as price will increase, moving from 1.6 to 2.20, so also the quantity demanded will fall. Now, may I also say that this is a market demand schedule, and that is why we have the figures in millions of gallons. It could be an individual demand schedule. If it is an individual demand schedule, then that means that we're looking at the quantity demanded of a product by just a single individual, a single consumer. And then we will not be talking about millions of gallons of fuel. But when we talk about market demand schedule, we are looking at the total of the quantity that was demanded by all the consumers in a specific market at a point in time, giving different prices. So that's the distinction between an individual demand schedule and a market demand schedule. Now, having handled the demand schedule, we now move on to the demand curve. Now, this is a demand curve, and the demand curve is simply a graphical representation of the relationship between price and quantity demanded of a certain good or service. So what this means is that what we have as a demand schedule on our graph, what we have as a demand schedule is now being represented on the graph. It's now being represented on the graph. And that is what we have as the demand curve, the representation of the demand schedule on a graph. So once you plot it on the graph, it will now give you the demand curve. Now, plotting on the graph. Of course, you know that when you want to plot a graph, you must have there should be variables that are represented on the y-axis and on the x-axis. Now, on this graph, you will see that price is represented on the vertical axis, and that is why you have their price per gallon in dollars, and quantity is represented on the horizontal axis as quantity of gasoline in millions of gallons. So once you represent that, you are able to plot the graph using the demand schedule. And you will see from this graph, what you will notice here is that the demand curve, when it has been plotted, is downward sloping. It's downward sloping. And this downward sloping demand curves represents the fact that there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. There is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, such that when prices increases, that's the inverse. Demand falls, quantity demanded falls. And when price falls, quantity demanded increases. Now, may I take this time out to find out that people have been able, Governor Moyo, please find out if people have been able to join via the YouTube link and get back to me. Is Moyo here? Moyo. Okay, they have, ma. Thank you. I just want to confirm that so that everybody, we are all on the same page. Thanks for that information. So that leads us to the law of demand. And the law of demand simply states that the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded, and the lower the price, the higher the quantity demanded. That shows that there's a negative or an inverse relationship between quantity demanded and price. May I also say here that this obtains holding all other variables constant. Which other variables are we talking about? We're looking at other variables that could affect demand, quantity demanded. So we're holding all other variables constant, and we are isolating only the effect of price on quantity demanded. And so the law of demand would hold, and it would display a negative and inverse relationship between quantity demanded and price. Now we want to do a class exercise. So I'm going to expect that you will do this exercise. That's the demand schedule there, represented there. And in that demand schedule, we have the quantity, the price. We have the first row is showing price, and the second row is showing quantity demanded. Quantity demanded, QD, and P is the price. And so all we have to do is very, very simple. All you have to do is just substitute prices into the demand equation or the demand function that has been specified. The demand function has been specified as QD is equal to 900 minus 10P. So you have to substitute the prices 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Substitute the prices into QD, and let's have the quantity demanded for this demand schedule. That's all that you have to do. And let's have the quantity demanded for each of them. I want you to work it out. And then I'll start calling the prices, and you will be telling me the quantity demanded. I'll just give you some few minutes to work it out so that by the time I start calling the prices, you'll be able to give me the quantity demanded. I'm coming. I'm coming. Trying to. So, okay. So let's go to the chat box and let me have your answers. Okay, some people are already sending the answers. Yes. Can we scan and send them? Whatever you like, just send. Just send so that I can read from here. Yes. Yes. Oh, okay now. Yes, the answers are correct. That's good. Okay, fine. That's good. The answers are correct. So we can move on to, I'm coming. I'm moving too fast. Yeah. No, I'm coming. So now we have established the fact that an abnormal demand curve, the normal demand curve is one where there is a negative and inverse relationship between demand and price. But yet, if you are familiar with economics, you will know that there are always exceptions to every rule. Of course, that is bound to happen because we're dealing with human beings. And human beings being what they are very irrational, even though in economics we assume that all human beings are rational. But we also know that some do not conform to normality. So there are exceptions. And that is what we want to look at now. What if the demand curve does not slope from left to right? What if it takes other shapes? What if it does not conform to the law of demand? Because that's the only thing that would make it slope from left to right. If there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. So let's look at those situations where there could be an abnormal demand curve. That means the curve will now not slope from left to right, but will take other shapes. It could be inverted, it could be quadratic, and so on and so forth. So we will start. Number one, inferior goods. Now, there are some goods that are known as inferior goods. And what are these goods? These goods that are known as inferior goods are goods that when there is an increase, in income, for example, when there's an increase in income, you find that people would no longer want to consume as much as what they had been consuming of that commodity. They will no longer want to consume what they have been consuming of that commodity. In other words, what it means here is that they probably had been consuming that commodity because of low level of income. But when there's an increase in their income, they now discover that they can begin to consume less of it or even do away with it. And in that case, the demand law will no longer hold, because reduction in price of that commodity will definitely not lead to an increase in the consumption of that commodity. Can you give me examples of such commodity? Pomo. Okay, I hear you. Gary. Okay. Salt. No. Salt does not come in. Salt is not an example of that.
Pure water.
You are not expected to talk in this class.
Okay, my sorry.
Okay, so we've seen. I hope you know. I hope you know that these examples that you're giving is relative. Because I can see some of you putting eggs, for example. Eggs will not come in. But for some people, it might be possible. But for some, egg is a nutrient that people should. Second-hand clothes, yes. When you give good examples, I will announce it. Second-hand clothes, yes, that's a very good example. In fact, that's the example I'm going to use now. Sachet water is also another one. Use phones, yes, those are examples. You will discover that Somebody is saying he doesn't understand what I'm saying. So let's take the second-hand clothes as an example, which is Okuweka. That's true. Now, let me give you that as an example. Somebody buying Okuweka clothes is buying it because the person wants to look sophisticated, but at the same time does not have enough money to buy new clothes. So as a result of that, it's using Okuweka clothes. So you find out that when the price of Okuweka clothes reduces, she will catch on that opportunity and increase the quantity she buys of it. That is following the law of demand. But peradventure, there's an increase in her wage or salary, and she has been promoted in her office. Now she has more money. She would no longer be buying Okuweka. She will now be buying the clothes, sophisticated clothes that she would desire to wear. And so at that point in time, even if the price of the Okuweka clothes falls, it will definitely not lead to increase in the purchase. It's not going to be buying them again. That's what we're saying here. So reduction in the price of Okuweka clothes will not bring about an increase in our demand. So that's why we're saying it becomes abnormal, because she's probably going to do away with it. And even if she's still going to buy, it will just be very few. Our interest now will be in the purchase of the sophisticated goods. That's what we mean by inferior goods are basically goods that are consumed when one is poor, and one will do away with it when one becomes rich. And that is why you can find some people using Pomo as an example. Using Pomo as an example. Gary is also an example. I didn't say it's not an example. Using Pomo as an example, because most people will go to the market and buy Pomo, and then they will come home and say Pomo is sweet. Not because Pomo is really sweet, but because they cannot even afford other types of protein. So when the money comes, then you see them either reducing the quantity they buy of Pomo. Even though the price of Pomo is falling, they would reduce its quantity and increase the quantity of others. That's what we're saying here. So they become inferior goods. Now, another one that brings about abnormal demand curve is fear of future rise in prices. Fear of future rise in prices. So you also find out that when people expect that prices of goods and services would rise in future, they tend to buy more, even though the price is increasing. You know that a very good example of that is fuel. You know that whenever people hear that they're going to increase the price of fuel, what do? They quickly run and begin to buy. And of course, the filling stations will continually increase the price of fuel. And as they do that, you find that people still buy because they know that the price will still go higher. So the fear that the price of commodities will increase in future will make people buy more, even at higher prices, which negates the law of demand. And I'm already seeing people giving me examples on the chat box. You know, I can begin to read the examples. Now, I know, okay, somebody says building in high-rise places, you know, not every form of building, but in developed areas, you know. Yes, that will happen. Rice as well. Yes. Yes. So I can see people giving examples. Chicken during festive period, that's also a very good one. It just keeps rising and people keep buying. Unilag private hostels. Yes. Okay, so let's move on to the third one, which is articles of ostentation or snob appeal. Now, articles of ostentation are goods that are of prestige, goods of value, you know, goods that portray high status. And most of these goods are expensive. But do you know that the higher the price, the more people will consume them? Yes, people are already giving me examples, luxury cars. The higher the gold, yes, the higher the price, the more people who value them would want to buy. Ferrari, those are the luxury cars, yes. They will want to buy. They take pride in buying designer clothes. They take pride in buying. And so if the price is not high, then they won't buy. Because to them, the higher price portrays value. It portrays prestige. It portrays high standard, high status. So they can only buy when the price is high. So the higher the price, the greater the quantity they will demand of it, because they just must possess it so that people can know that they have arrived. So that they can know that they have arrived. Okay. Now we also look at bandwagon effects. Bandwagon effects. Now, the bandwagon effect is commodities that are popular. That's the essence of bandwagon. It is popular. Everybody. It's something that is in vogue. Can you give me examples of that before I begin to explain? What is in vogue? Okay, somebody is saying, not too expensive anyway. What is in vogue? What is Labubu? I don't want us to use something that is too expensive. So the iPhone 17 thing would be an expensive thing. I want something just in between. What? Okay, baggy jeans. Yes, that's a good example. I know baggy jeans is in vogue now. Yes, what is in vogue? You're not giving me good examples. Low fat. Yes, that's another one. Crop tops. Yes, thank you. I think I have enough examples now. So it's a bandwagon effect, and you find out that because it is popular, people are buying, people want to wear, people want to consume. And as a result of that, because people want to consume, you'll find that demand will push up the price of these commodities. And even though the price of these commodities have increased, people will still keep buying. That's the bandwagon effect. So that increases in prices will still lead to increases in quantity demanded. And the same thing happens if something is out of vogue, that is not popular. Even if the price is falling falling prices will still lead to fall in demand because it's already out of vogue and people are just will not bother buying them. So let's move on to the next one, which is necessary goods. Necessary goods. So we look at goods that are of necessity, and okay, people are already giving an example. Some people are saying salt, foodstuff, water. Okay, it all depends on you. Any good that you consider to be necessary. Now, I would use the example of medicine. I'll use the example of medication. If you are placed on drugs, it becomes a necessary good because you must consume to be alive. And so even if the price shoots up, you don't have an option. You must still buy those goods. But the examples you are giving are also very good. Food, for example. Yes, insulin for diabetics, thank you. So it doesn't really matter what the price is. You will still buy. You can't reduce the quantity that you are consuming because the price has gone up. Now, the same thing for inhaler, yes, that's a good example. Now, for some people, food is a necessary commodity. There are people who cannot survive without food. They can't survive without it. So it doesn't really matter if the price goes up, they will consume. Like somebody said, housing, for example, you must have shelter. So if you live in a house and your what's it called, your landlord increases the house rent, you will look for it because you can't live under the bridge with you and every member of your family. So with necessary goods, you would also find out that increase in price will not bring about reduction in quantity demanded. It won't reduce the quantity that is being demanded. So we've been able to deal with that. Let's move on to factors that would affect quantity demanded. What are those factors that would affect demand? So let's start with the first one, price. Of course, that's what we've been talking about all along. Price affects quantity demanded. That's what we've been talking about all along, price. And we know that there's an indirect relationship between the price and the quantity demanded. All things working well. Number 2 will be price of other commodities. Yes, price of other commodities. The price of other commodities also have an influence on the quantity you demanded. Thank you, all things being equal. That was what I wanted to remember. Thank you, all things being equal. Yes, so price of other commodities. Now this works in 2 ways. And the 2 ways is whether those commodities are substitutes or whether the commodities are complements. Of course, we know that when commodities are substitutes, that means that you cannot purchase both of them together. You either buy one because both of them serve the same purpose and they will provide the same utility. So we refer to them as substitute goods. So when we are looking at the price of substitute goods, now give me examples of substitute goods so that we can use it as an example and say, okay, Milo and Bonvit, and see what happens to the relationship between price and quantity demanded. Okay, so let's take Coke and Pepsi. So Coke and Pepsi are substitute goods. If there's an increase in the price of Coke, let's say Coke increases from, I don't even know how much Coke is. Let's assume Coke increases from 500 Naira to 700 Naira. If Coke increases from 500 Naira to 700 Naira, now what do you think will happen to the quantity demanded of Pepsi? Will the quantity demanded of Pepsi, will it fall or will it rise? If the price of Coke increases and Pepsi is still 500 and then Coke increases to 700, what will happen to the quantity demanded of Pepsi? Yes, it will rise. The answers are coming in and they are correct. It will rise. Definitely, it will rise. That is what will happen because both goods are substitute goods. Now, let's look at complementary goods. Complementary goods are goods that are jointly demanded because they are jointly consumed. So now, give me examples of complementary goods. Yes, car and petrol, bread and butter. Bread and butter might not be a very perfect example though. There's so many things you can do with your bread. Generator and petrol, yes. Although the generator can use diesel, but most generators still use fuel in Nigeria more than diesel. So we have cylinder and gas. Yes, that's another very good one. Sponge and soap, gun and bullets. That's a very good one. Okay. So let's use phone and charger. I want us to use phone and charger. They are jointly demanded. Once you buy a phone, you must also have a charger. You can't buy one without the other. They are both together. So if the price of phones increases, what will happen to the quantity demanded of chargers? Will it increase or will it fall? If the price of phone increases, what will happen to the quantity demanded of chargers? What will happen? Yes. Just one answer that I've seen. Yes, the answers are coming in now. No, it will fall. It will fall. It will fall. If your answer is not that it will fall, you are wrong. Because both of them are jointly demanded. So if the price of phone increases, definitely the quantity demanded of charger will decrease. Because if the price of phone increases, the quantity demanded of phones will fall. And once the quantity demanded of phones falls, the quantity demanded of charger will also fall. So it will fall. For those who don't understand, that is why I'm explaining better. Number 3, we look at income. Now let's look at income. Now, income of the consumer. Income of the, I did not talk about necessity. I don't know why people are asking these questions. I did not talk about necessity. I did not say phone is a necessity. I said goods that are jointly consumed. You consume both of them together. I don't think some people are in this class. I really don't understand what they are saying. Income of the consumer. Now, your income is also a determinant of the quantity that you demand of a commodity. Your income is a determining factor. And so it is expected that if, how do we say it? If your income is rising, it's expected that the quantity you would demand would also increase. And if your income falls for one reason or the other, probably because you are out of job, you are retrenched, probably because there's a challenge in your place of work and they decide to reduce your income. If your income falls for one reason or the other, then the quantity you demand would also fall. And if your income increases, then the quantity you demand would also increase. Now, I want to take time to explain the charger and the phone again, because somebody here is asking me to explain that again. Now, phone and charger are complementary goods. And complementary goods means that they complement each other. The charger complements the phone, and both of them are demanded jointly. You cannot use your phone without a charger. So both of them come together. In fact, in most cases, you buy them together. You don't even buy them separately. It's not like you go and buy a phone and then you go and buy a charger. In most cases, the box that comes with the phone already comes with a charger. So we're saying here that if the price of one, let's even assume that the price of the phone increases for whatever reason, automatically, when the price of phones increases, you would find out that the quantity that will be demanded of phones will fall. It will fall because of the increase in the price of phones. And once the price of phone falls, the quantity that will be demanded of phones will fall. Once the quantity demanded of phones falls, automatically the quantity demanded of charger will also fall because they come together. So that's why we say that if there's an increase in the price of phones, there will be a fall in the quantity demanded of chargers. So I think I have explained that. So let us move forward. Taste or preference? Taste or preference? Now we're looking at what you like, what you prefer, what you have a taste in, something that you like consuming. And the logic here is that for whatever you have a taste for, even with increases, you will continually increase your demand for it because you like to consume it. That's what we're saying. So with increases, with a taste, with a desire for something, with a preference for something, you will continually increase your demand for it. Okay, Felix is telling me that what he prefers is shawarma. So it doesn't really matter at any point in time. He will always choose shawarma because he has a taste for it. So he would always demand for it. That's what we're saying. You would always demand for it. And so there'll be increase in what you desire of it. So people are telling us what they prefer. It's by choice anyway. Yes, I can see examples of rational human beings. Yes, coconut bread. That's somebody's preference. So, eba, can you imagine? I don't like it. Size of population. So let's look at population. Population is also a determining factor in quantity demanded. Of course, the more people there are, the more there would be the increase in demand, in quantity demanded. Because the more people there are, we're adding up, when we say demand, total demand, we're adding up the summation of all the demand in an economy, if it's an aggregate demand that we're looking at anyway. So you find out that the size of the population is a determinant. More people would normally result in more increase in quantity demanded. We move on to the next one, which is available credit facilities. The ideology here is that when people have access to credit facilities, they tend to increase their consumption. And yes, that is also very, very realistic. For students like you, if peradventure Mama Moria canteen allows for students to eat on credit, most students will buy more than what they would normally buy. They would increase their consumption because that means that they would eat and then pay later. And so they can eat as much as they want now. And whenever money comes in, they can use that to offset their debts. But if there are no credit facilities, because there are no credit facilities in Yamoria canteen anyway, that means that you have to curtail your consumption. That's the implication. Because you can only buy what you have, what you can eat, what you have on hand, you can only buy. So that limits your consumption. That's what we're saying here. And then another example is, when people want to do marriage or burial ceremony, and they put on this Ashwebi thing and they ask people to come and buy. If you know that you want to sell so many Ashwebi, the way to go about it is to allow for credit facility. Distribute the Ashwebi to people and allow them to pay later. Then you will find that many people will buy the Ashwebi. But once you say that, I'm not giving you unless you pay, then less people will buy. So availability of credit facilities, allows for people to be able to buy now and pay later. And so quantity demanded is increased. So we move on to the next one, which is advertisement. Wow. Advertisement also increases quantity demanded. In Nigeria, we have some adverts that when you watch, you would want to consume. In fact, I've had to consume sometimes. And then sometimes you find out that there's that power of advertisements that if you have seen an advert that you like, even if you are not buying now, when you eventually get to the market and you want to buy, that advert brings that product to mind, and that is what you buy. I'm already seeing examples of adverts that are very good. It's showing on the screen, and they are of course, there are adverts and there are adverts. There are adverts that, yes, when you watch, you eventually consume. So we are seeing all the adverts. I'm seeing you mention Indomie. Yes, I know that is also very good. I can't remember what Milo is all about. I don't think I can remember. Okay, but you're giving me anyway, you watch, so you know. And that's good. So we will move on to weather and climate conditions. Weather can also affect quantity demanded. Quantity demanded. Weather can affect quantity demanded. We know that in some weather, some type of weather, hey, Mama do good. I like that too. In some kind of weather, it increases quantity demanded. For example, now, water. The rate at which people would drink water, cold water, yes, because people, where the weather is hot, and people would become dehydrated, and so they need water. So the climate condition at this point in time would make you increase the quantity demanded of water. In the same vein, if we are looking at the wet season, there will be a high demand of what's it called? Umbrellas, cardigan, yes. Cardigan, umbrellas, raincoats, boots. These are the kind of things that will be in demand during raining season. And so somebody also gave me an example, an hot tea. Yes, thank you. Somebody gave an example of the hot weather and said armless cloths. Yes, that's also a good one. So we can see these examples. Then we go to government policy. Government policy can also affect demand, because government can encourage and discourage the quantity of a product that is bought. Now, of course, you know that government, let me give you an example of encourage and discourage that I'm talking about. For example, government can prohibit some businesses and consider them as illegal. So once those businesses are considered as illegal, the products from those businesses, people will not demand for them because they already know that they are illegal. Of course, the quantity demanded of them would fall because government has said you cannot bring in these things. You cannot bring in these things. People who would adhere to government policy, and even they will not be able, some of them will not be sold in the open markets. And so as a result of government policy, you would find out that it will definitely reduce the quantity that is demanded of it. And government policy can also encourage, the buying of some commodities, because government has put in those things, and then you find out that is encouraging the purchase of those things, maybe by lowering its prices, and then people would consume, such things. Now, if you look at rice, government policy, rice, there was a time when government banned foreign rice in Nigeria. As a result of that, the borders were locked, As a result of that, there was an increase in the demand for local rice. That's government policy. There was an increase in the demand for local rice as against foreign rice. But immediately the borders were open again, there was an increase in the demand for foreign rice. So government policy can affect quantity demanded. And then finally, we look at taxation. Now, tax is very important, and there are various forms of tax. You have tax that you have on income, and you have tax that you have on commodities that are bought. And these are quotas, there are quotas, bans, all sorts of tax that has to be paid on commodities. And all sorts of tax that also has to be paid by companies or industries that produces these commodities. So the amount of tax that is paid either by the producers or by the consumers, would also have an effect on quantity demanded. And also the tax that is paid by the consumers themselves would also have an effect. Let's take the consumers. If the income tax is high, that also means that the amount that is left for consumption will be low. Because in economics, we say that income is equal to consumption plus saving. And then we say that disposable income, which is what you actually spent, is income subtracted from tax. So what you have available to spend, which is your disposable income, is what you have left after tax has been deducted. So if tax is high, that means your disposable income will be low. You will demand less. And if tax is low, then your disposable income will be higher and you will demand more. In the same way, tax like VAT, people are already giving me examples, like VAT, value-added tax, tax on commodities. The higher the level of tax that you're paying, it will also reduce the quantity that you are buying. Because in most cases, you'll find that there are some tax that the producer will shift the burden on the consumer. And that means that there will be increase in the prices of those goods and services. And that increase in prices would ensure that quantity demanded is reduced. So we have all forms of tax. We have tariffs, we have custom duties, we have quotas, we have all different forms of tax that would affect quantity demanded. But the logic behind it is that if there's an increase in tax, there will definitely be a reduction in quantity that is demanded. So now let's move on to another concept in demand, and that is change in quantity demanded. Yes, there are excise tax as well. Thank you. There are import tax, there is excise tax. Change in quantity demanded. Now, what do we mean by change in quantity demanded? We are looking at a situation wherein quantity demanded changes. That is what it means. And the only thing that can bring about change in quantity demanded is price. Now, look at what we have here. I have a graph here already, which looks like a normal demand curve, sloping from left to right. Now, so if we are looking at a change in quantity demanded, we are saying that the only thing that can bring about that change is price. And so we have price plotted there on the vertical axis, quantity plotted on the horizontal axis. And so it shows us the different quantities that are bought at various prices, resulting in a change in quantity demanded. Now let's look at the various points that we have there. We have a point A. At point A, the price is $1.2 per gallon, and the quantity demanded is 700 million gallons. That's at point A. We also have point B, which shows the price and quantity, and then point C, which shows the price and quantity. Now, let's start at point B. If we are starting at point B, where price is $1.6 and 550 million gallons are demanded at point B. Now, let's assume that this demand curve, the point shifts from B to A. Now, if there's a shift from B to A, are you with me? Or if there's a change, not a shift, sorry. If there's a change from point B to point A, the shift from point B to point A implies that price is now 120 gallons and 700 million gallons are demanded. That means that there has been an increase in quantity demanded. So if there's a change in demand from point B, which is 550, to point A, which is 700 million gallons, there has been an increase in quantity demanded. Of course, if there's a change from point B to point C, that means that there has been a change as well in quantity demanded. And that represents a fall in quantity demanded from 550 to 420. Now, we're saying that the reason why quantity demanded has fallen from 550 to 420 is as a result of price. And the reason why quantity demanded has risen from 550 in point B to 700 in point A is as a result of a change in price. So we're saying that it is only price and price alone that will bring about changes in quantity demanded. It's as simple as that. And this follows suit with the law. This aligns with the law of supply. Now we want to go to, who is that?
Yes.
Now we want to go to change in demand. Remember that the first one we talked about is change in quantity demanded. And we talked about an increase and a decrease in quantity demanded. Now we want to look at change in demand. And for change in demand, we are now looking at the change in demand, that what will bring about a change in demand. The other time we said what will bring about a change in quantity demanded is just the price. For change in demand, all other factors that we have talked about, all these factors, let me go back to them. All these factors that we have talked about that affect demand, except price, all these factors that we have talked about, you are looking at it on the screen now. All these factors, any one of them can bring about a change in demand, but price is held constant because we have looked and isolated the effects of price when we were looking at change in quantity demanded. Now we are focusing on all other factors that can affect demand. And any of these factors can bring about a change in demand. And that change that it will bring about is referred to as a shift of the demand curve. And so if you look at the demand curve that we have on the screen, if you look at the diagram, the graph there on the screen, you would see that there are actually three demand curves there. There is demand curve DO, there is demand curve D1, and there is demand curve D2. So there are actually 3 demand curves: D, O, D1, and D2. So let's see how these shifts happen. And we're going to look at one of those factors. We are looking at income. We want to choose income as one of those factors that can bring about a shift in the demand curve. So let's assume we've seen a demand curve, prices on the vertical axis, quantity demanded on the horizontal axis. So let's not assume that ordinarily for this person, or for some group of persons anyway, or in an economy, let's assume, DO is the first demand curve. So we know that this is what happens. This is the demand curve for the price of cars. And you can see that the demand curve DO shows us that at the price of $20,000 per car, 18 million cars were demanded. 20,000, 18 million cars were demanded. Now that's what happens. But now let's imagine that there was an increase in the income of individuals. The increase in the income of these individuals will now cause a shift of the demand curve to the right, which represents an increase. So that means that we will now have another demand curve. It cannot be that same demand curve, because the only thing that can happen on that same demand curve is if there's a change in price. Because it is a change in income, it will bring up forth a shift of the demand curve to the right, representing an increase in income. Now, as a result of that increase in income, we have a new demand curve, which is D1. And you will see that on that new demand curve D1, the price is still constant, which is $20,000. But there has been an increase in the quantity of cars demanded. Quantity of cars demanded is now 20 million. And that has happened because of the increase in income, which is at point S. Now, if peradventure there is a fall in income, and I'm giving you reasons why that can be when we're explaining it, then that means that the demand curve will shift to the left. And once it shifts to the left, then we would have another demand curve, which is D2. Now, from D2 now, you will see that the price is still constant at 20,000, but quantity has fallen to 14.4 million at point T. At point T. So this implies that what has brought about a change in demand is as a result of the change in income. That's why we say that the change in demand occurs when different quantities of a product are demanded at a particular price. And these changes are brought by other factors affecting demand except price. That is why we say at a particular price. So that is the explanation for shifts in demand curves. So let's move on to types of demand. Types of demand. The first one is the joint or complementary demand. And we've already explained that when we were looking at factors affecting demand. And we're able to give good examples of the joint or complementary demand. And it is when goods are consumed together to provide a given level of satisfaction. Mostly, they are purchased as a set. Goods are consumed together to provide a given level of satisfaction. And we've given an example of they are purchased as a set, the phone and the charger. Yes, gas and cylinder. Bread and beans. I'm taking that with a grain of salt. Yes. So they are purchased, they are consumed and purchased together. Joint or complementary demand. And no, I didn't say it's not, I didn't say bread and butter is not acceptable. I said with a grain of salt, because there's so many things you can do without bread. You can do with bread without putting butter. Just like somebody has already mentioned bread and beans, for example. So there's so many other complementary things that you can put, that you can use with bread, you know, and it's so obvious. That's why I say it's really not a very good example. Now, pap and sugar, okay? Yes, somebody is also saying we can also use mayonnaise. Yes, yes, we can do that. Okay, belt and trouser, that's also a very good one. Car and petrol. I'm also taking that with a grain of salt as well, because we have electric cars and we have cars that use diesel. Okay, toothpaste and brush. Book and pen, yes. Phone and charger, we've already said that. Okay, so we move on, and we've already said what will happen to, if there's an increase in one, what will happen to the quantity demanded of the other. We've said that. So let's go to, yes, TV and remote is also a very good one. Let's go to competitive demand. And we've also explained that when commodities are substitutes of each other, when commodities are substitutes of each other, and that means that both of them can be used for the same purpose. Both of them can be used for the same purpose, and we've already explained that as well. We've given examples, and we use that of Pepsi and Coke. And we've also been able to satisfy what will happen if there is an increase in one, and what will happen to the quantity demanded of the other. Omo and Good Mama, yes, they are substitutes. Colgate and toothpaste. How can you say Colgate and toothpaste? No, that one is not acceptable. Colgate is a toothpaste. So let's move on to the third one, which is, yes, Colgate and Close-Up better. Maggi and none. So let's move on to derived demand. Now, derived demand is an indirect. Derived demand is what am I saying? Derived demand is an indirect demand. It's an indirect demand because you are demanding for the product, not for itself, but from the utility you can derive from it. That's why we say it is a derived demand. Let me take that again. When you say something is indirect, that means it does not directly impact, and that's what we're saying. So once you derive a commodity, you are demanding for a commodity because of what you can get from that commodity, not for the commodity itself. Okay, people are already giving me examples. Yes, wood for making furniture. Wood on its own might not really have so much value, but once you use it to make furniture, then you get the value from it. And so you are demanding for the wood because of the furniture that can be made out of it. That's why you are buying the wood, because you want to make a chair or a table out of it. So the same thing for, I'm giving you an example here. I said factors of production, all factors of production. You know, when you demand for land, Land in itself, it's of no use until you make use of it. So once you are buying the land, you're not buying any amount you buy the land, you're buying the land because of what you can make out of the land or the value that the land can give to you. So we've seen examples, and yes, the examples are there and they're all good. So let's go to the last one, which is composite demand. When a product has several uses or are demanded for multiple purposes. There's a product and you demand for it because there are several uses to which you can make use. That's what you call composite. Many. It can be used for multiple purposes. For example, the demand for crude oil. Crude oil can be made into diesel, petrol, into gas. Okay, people are already giving me examples, but please give me what you can use it for. Don't just give one example. So if you are saying milk, you should be able to say for cheese, for cream, for butter. Then that will show that you understand what we're talking about. So give examples. Flour for baking bread, for cake, for sausages. Yes, that is good. That's a composite demand. For multiple purposes. So if you say leather for shoes, what else can leather be used for? It should be more than one. We said for the essence of it is for multiple purposes. When I get a good answer, I would read it. Then you know that your answer is good. Leather for shoes, for bags, for curtains. Beans for akara, for moimoi, for kuku. Palm oil for home use, for soap making. Even palm oil is used for cream as well. Aluminium for windows and doors. Okay, so I think that we have enough examples. So these are the different types of demand. So now we're going to take a few minutes because I want to stop sharing this, and I'm going to bring the next topic.
But cheating is not.
No
It's a must. It's a must to read.
It's not a liberty to start talking. People should remain food for me.
Huh?
In my class.
People should. You know what?
Hmm. Mm. Mm. Can you imagine? I'm coming. It seems I did not save this in PDF, so I'm trying to do that. Okay. So I'm going to expect that this will not take as much time as we used to demand, because all that we have done with demand, we're going to do with supply. So like some people would say that supply is the opposite of demand. While we're talking about demand, we were concentrating on the consumers, which you are one. But now that we want to talk about supply, we are going to be thinking as producers and manufacturers. And I know some of you are already producers in one form or the other. So you're going to put yourself as a producer in order to be able to understand the theory of supply. So you need to jettison the fact that you are a consumer so that you don't get it all mixed up. So we start. Supply is the relationship between price of a certain product and the quantity of that good or service the producers are willing and able to offer for sales at a price. Willing and able. We're still coming back to that term. Willing and able. So the implication of this is that it is not everything that a producer produces that is willing to sell. Sometimes when he produces, he can keep some in the store. Sometimes he can give some for personal use. Sometimes he can give out some. But what he actually offers for sale, what actually takes to the market that is ready to sell, that is what is called supply at a point in time. And it has to be at a particular price. So having said that, we are able to have what is called a supply schedule, where we have a table that shows the quantity supplied of a particular good or service at various prices. at various prices. So of course, while we're doing that, we are holding all other factors constant. So like we have the demand schedule, we also have the supply schedule. Here we are also looking at 12. So we have the supply schedule giving us the price of fuel per gallon in dollars and the quantity supplied in millions of gallons. So from this table, you would see that when the price was $1, this producer supplied 500 gallons. When the price was 160, this producer supplied 640 gallons. And when the price was 220, he supplied 720. The implication of this is that as prices are increasing, supply is also increasing. And that is logical. As a supplier, you are into production because you want to maximize profits. You want to make as much profit as possible. So once there's an increase in price, or once you increase the price of your commodity, there's a tendency that you increase your supply so that you can sell as many as possible. And vice versa. If the price of product keeps falling, then the quantity supply would also keep falling because the supplier does not have the zeal to continue to produce because the profit that is going to make out of it will not be so much. So you find out that when prices fall, quantity supplied will fall, and when prices increase, quantity supply will increase. And so when you plot this on a graph, it looks like this. It gives you this supply curve, which is a graphical representation of the relationship between price and quantity supplied. Price is on the vertical axis and quantity is on the horizontal axis. And so when you plot the supply schedule, you get the supply curve. And the supply curve slopes upwards. It's upward sloping. It's upward, so the upward sloping supply curve implies that as price increases, quantity supply also increases, and vice versa. So this implies that there is a direct relationship between price and quantity supply. They flow in the same direction. So let's move on to the law of supply. Now, what does the law of supply read? Or what does it state? It says that the higher the price, the higher the quantity supplied, and the lower the price, the lower the quantity supplied. And like I said, this explains that there's a positive and there's a direct relationship between quantity supplied and price. Now, like we have for the demand curve, there are also cases when there are abnormal supply curves. When you discover that at lower prices, quantity supply does not fall, and at higher prices, quantity demanded also, at higher prices, quantity supplied does not arise. So let's look at these exceptional cases where the law of supply will not hold. The first one is when there is increase in wages. Who is that? Okay, so in production, one of the factors of production is labor. One of the factors of production is labor. And so you find out that one would expect, and that's what normally happens at first instance. When you employ workers, you pay them, they work, you increase their pay, then they increase their productivity. They increase their productivity as well. In fact, you find that some of them will begin to even work longer hours just to show their appreciation for the work. And they are willing to work because you are increasing their pay. But then it will get to a certain extent. Even when you continually increase their pay, they cannot increase the supply of their labor. Here we are looking at supply of labor. So it is expected that once you increase pay, the laborer will increase his labor services. You increase pay, it will increase it, but it will get to a certain extent that it is no longer possible for the laborer to increase his service even at higher pay. For example, if you take the number of hours that is being worked, that the person works, at least the person will go home. So even if he's going to work late, he will still go home. So if a person goes to work, like say resumes 8 o'clock and leaves work by 10:30 or 11 p.m. in the night, he can't do more than that. Even if you are paying him double his salary, he will go home by at least by 11 latest. He will go home. He must go home and sleep to come back the next day. So that what we are saying here is that increase in the wages will not at all times, at a certain point in time, will not at all times bring about increase in supply, like will have in quantity supply, like will have been expected. So you have what is called a backward sloping supply curve. Another example is when there is target income. Target income. What do we mean by this? Let me give you an example before we come back to its explanation. When you have a farmer, for example, when you have a farmer who has estimated that once I made this amount of money as profit, I must make this amount of money as profit. That's a farmer. You'll find that for such farmers, if for one reason or the other, because you know that for most times farmers are not in control of the prices that they sell their products. It's all based on demand and supply, because they basically did agricultural products, and when they harvest, they don't know. You can get to the market, and then you find out that every other person also has a good harvest, and the commodities are everywhere in the market. So in essence, what I'm saying here is that for a farmer who has a target income, who says this is the amount of profit I'm going to make this year, or I need to make this amount of money for me to continue producing or planting this good or commodity or product. Once he has made that decision, what we are saying here that if he gets to the market, and because of supply, maybe there's too much supply of that commodity in the market, the price falls. The price falls. The farmer would still sell those products at the falling prices. They won't go back home, especially if those products are perishable products. You'll be compelled to sell those products. And so you know that negates the law of supply, that at lower prices, the quantity supplied will do. Number 3, fixed assets. And I specifically said some fixed assets because it might not apply to all assets. So when we talk about fixed assets, we are still in production. So let's take land, for example. Let's take land, for example. You know that a plot of land, even though it has not increased in size, a plot is still a plot. A plot is not 2 plots, and a plot is not 1.5 plots. But you know that a plot of land over the year will continually increase without an increase in the plot. It is that same fixed land. Land is fixed in nature. It cannot be increased. So that plot of land that we're talking about in question is still that same plot of land. But over the years, the price of that land will continually increase yet the quantity will not increase. So that also negates the law of supply. And then finally, we have monopolistic tendencies. We know of a monopolist. I think that's one of the topics we're going to treat in this course. A monopolist is considered somebody who is a sole producer of a product, is the sole producer. And as a result of that, it can control the price at which he sells that product. But because of that, you know that even when prices increases, the monopolist will still want to increase the rate you still want the price to continue to increase. And so the normal thing is to increase the law of supply says when you increase prices, you increase supply. But for a monopolist, once the prices increases, he might decide not to increase supply, but rather reduce supply so that it can continually have an increase in price, knowing fully well that is the only supplier, is the sole supplier of that product. So a monopolist would prefer, once prices is increasing, so even reduce supply so that it can continually push up the prices. So these are cases where the law of supply might not hold. Now, having said that, I think we will stop. Should we take this? I think we are going to stop here today because the next thing is factors affecting supply. I don't think we will be able to do that within the time frame that we have. So I think we can stop here for today. And please let me tell you that there's going to be a class next week. The lectures have not been cancelled because of convocation. And because this class is an online class, there will be class next week by God's grace, all things being equal. So let's just take the few minutes that we have. If there are questions, you can raise up your hand. I don't think this raise up hand will work in this very many people on this platform. But it can still work. But I won't be able to accommodate those that are on the YouTube. Okay, so I think you can still send your questions through the chat box. And if you are part of those on the normal thing, you can raise up your hand. Okay, if there are no questions, wishing you a lovely weekend. Take care of yourself. And don't eat too much rice of other people's convocation. Knowing fully well that if you eat too much of others, during your own time too, you must be ready. You must cook also for people to come and eat your own. Okay, somebody is saying I should explain the fixed assets again. Now let me explain that. I use land as an example. When assets, I'm laughing because I'm reading what some people are writing. Now, fixed assets, yes. When assets are fixed, fixed in terms of their supply cannot be increased. That's the essence of the fixed. And so because their supply cannot be increased, then you find out that increases in price will not lead to increase in supply. That's what we're saying. Now, let me give you another example apart from land. Now, if you take an artwork, I'm talking of the original artwork by artists, you would notice that as the year goes by, that artwork will continually increase in price because there's only one of it. It's fixed. If you find other types, They are copies, not the original. The original itself will continually appreciate in value. So it's fixed, but the price will continually increase. It will continually increase. That's what we're saying. So I think I've been able to answer that question. And the question on taxation, you will get the reply when we, okay, can you explain the articles of ostentation or snub appeal? Yes. The articles of ostentation, as the case may be, or snub appeal, like I said, are articles that give status, you know, that gives an implication that
Please.
you have a right. You are rich. They are luxurious items. They're items that are very good quality and they are very expensive. Yes, that's the good word for it. They're expensive. So those are those articles. They are the articles of ostentation, snub appeal. So people who buy them because of the value, buy them because of the prices. If the prices are not very high, they believe they are not of good quality. And there are articles that will make statements. So you find out that when their prices are high, the higher the price, the higher the desire to own it. And people have given us example of that, the luxury cars, you know, and the luxury phones and whatnot. Who is that? Mute yourself. Then monopolistic competition, monopolistic tendency. I think I've explained that very well. That a monopoly, except you don't know what a monopolist is the one that is the sole producer. Because he's the sole producer, he can control the price at which he sells his products, you know, and he can decide to also control the quantity that he sells because he's the monopoly, he's the sole producer. So when there's an increase in supply, the expectation is that when there's an increase in price, the expectation is that there should be an increase in supply. That's the expectation. But he will not increase supply because he wants to continually increase his price. So he will cut down on his supply. Once he cuts down on the supply, people will demand more of that commodity. They will. And so it will continue to push the price up. But if it were not a monopoly, if it were not a monopolist, other people will bring their products into the market. So it doesn't have a control over quantity. And that's what I'm saying. Somebody is saying, is there a difference between substitute and competitive demand? No. That the goods are in competition means that they are substitutes. It means the same thing. I think I've answered enough questions. So I think we can call it a day. So take care of yourself. Bye. Bye. Because it seems these questions are being asked by those who didn't come to the class. Thank you, Jawi.
Bye, ma.
Bye,
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye, bye, ma.
Bye.
Bye, ma.
Bye.
Bye, ma.
Have a nice
Bye.
day. Have a
And
nice
you too.
day.
And you too.
Bye, ma.
Let's go to convocation rice.
Yeah, video on motor.
Stop. No, my phone they use.
Yuma is friendly, like.
No.
Yeah, now shut up now. Hey.
Yeah, that do people. That's our finish. You should be going to your house. Yeah.
Be going now. Be going
All of
now.
you should start coming to school now. Are
If
you hearing?
going.
I have to see all of you in school now.